All right, welcome everyone to another episode of ngWeber. Today is Thursday, April 11th. It's 12 o'clock in Mountain Standard Time. Welcome to anyone who may join live. Hopefully, you all are excited as I am. Today, we're going to be talking about PWAs in Angular, or progressive web apps. So we'll dive into that in just a minute. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Preston Lamb. Here's a little bit of information about me. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at plambweb, PLAMBWEB. Sorry about that. And on GitHub at pjlc.dev. And then my website, you can find me there at prestonlamb.com. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about today is what is a PWA. So I went to this link you can see at the bottom, developers.google.com, and they kind of break it down into three parts. They say progressive web apps are user experiences, and they are reliable, fast, and engaging. And they say that this new level of quality allows them to earn a place on the user's home screen. So first, reliable, they should load instantly. And even if you don't have a network connection or a Wi-Fi connection or whatever, it should be able to pull up. So it should work offline. It should be fast and respond to user interactions. And then it should be engaging. And so it should feel like a natural app on the device. So that's those are some of the requirements that Google lists on their site about what a progressive web app should be. So I was thinking of some of the benefits of a PWA, and one I thought about kind of goes off those points that Google makes, is that it should be easy to use. You should be able to use it on your phone as if it was a native app, or even if they use it in a browser and they don't install it to their phone, it should be natural to use. Another benefit is that it does updates in the background for you. You don't have to go to the Play Store and download updates because the updates are loaded in the background for the user. Another benefit is that you get one code base. So instead of having a code base for your web application, a code base for your Angular application, for your Android application, and one for your iOS app, you have one code base. It works on the next point here. It works cross-platform. So it'll work on Android and iOS. It'll work on a desktop browser. And the user really will see no difference. And so from a developer standpoint, I think that's one of the big upsides to it. And then the last point I have here is that it's the same web tools that you as a developer know and love. The things that you work with every day, you get to continue using them. And so you can determine what your application is going to be, and then you can write the same code for every user in every situation. And so I think that progressive web apps, I don't know that much about them. I'm just learning about them as well, but I can see where this is a really great place that the web is going to, and that it will be a really big benefit for users, for end users going forward. All right, so this is obviously an Angular-centric meetup and podcast. So from here on out, we'll talk more about specifically how do we do this in Angular. So the first part, just start a new application. In this demo, I just called it PWA-app. And so we generate that with ng-new. And then after it creates the application for us and we change into that directory, then you can run a schematic called that's ng-add, and then @angular/pwa. And that schematic will go ahead and install and download and configure some of the needed parts of a progressive web app. So it does a few things here. I have them listed here. The first is it adds a manifest.json to the root of the project. That has information about the progressive web app. It adds a file called ngsw-config.json, and that's the config for the service worker. It adds some default icons that the app will use when it's installed on a user's device. It updates the app.module.ts file and registers a service worker for you. It updates the angular.json file and adds the manifest and the service worker config files to the assets list so that it's copied into the build folder. And then it updates the index.html and includes a link to the manifest.json and a meta tag for theme color, and then a no script tag in case the user doesn't have JavaScript enabled on their device. So that's what ngadd does for you. So once you've done that, you could just go ahead and build and serve your application, and it would technically be a progressive web app already. The one thing about it is that the service worker does not work with ngServe. I'm not 100% sure why. I don't know if it's something with the Webpack dev server that they use with the Angular CLI, but that's what the Angular documentation said. So you can't use ngServe for it, but you can do a build and then use something like HTTP server to serve the built application for you locally, and you can see what it looks like. So this command here would do that: ng build, give it the -- prod for a production build, and then you can use npx, or you can globally install HTTP server and then serve that application. And in this case, I specified port 8080 for that. All right, so you could do that. You can just go ahead and serve that application as it is right after ngAdd, but it really wouldn't have anything in there because it's just a default Angular application. And so it does come with a little bit of configuration for you in the Angular service worker, the ngsw-config.json file that we talked about, but it doesn't configure a lot for you. It just kind of does the basics. So when you want to configure that, your progressive web app, and you want to tell the service worker what asset groups to cache and how to cache data that you get from an API, you'll be using what, at least for Angular, they've called the asset groups and the data groups. And assets are resources that are part of the app that version and update along with the application. And data groups are more like API calls and other data that doesn't necessarily version along with the application. And you can read more about that at the link there at the bottom of the screen. So this is the interface definition for an asset group that comes right from the Angular documentation. So each asset group, you give it a name. You specify an install mode and an update mode. Those are optional, but you can put those there. And then there's a resources object. And most of the time, so far, what I've seen is that you would use that files attribute there on the resources. And that is a string array, and that you can put patterns in there, file patterns in there, and those would be cached as part of this asset group. As for install mode and update mode, there's two options: prefetch or lazy. Prefetch means go and get all the assets and cache them up front, and then lazy means get them and cache them when they're requested. And then update mode will default to whatever install mode is, and I think install mode defaults to prefetch for you, if I remember right. Data groups, they're pretty similar. There's some similar parts. You give it a name, you give it a string array of URLs that are part of this data group that will be cached. You can put an optional version number if you want. And then the cache config object, you have to have a max size on there, and then a max age. And then the other two are timeout and strategy, and those are optional. But the strategy, freshness, or performance are the two options there. Freshness means that it prioritizes making a call and trying to get new data. And then if it doesn't work, then after the timeout that you specify there, it will use the cached data for you. And then performance, it will, if you specify that as the strategy, it will use the cached data first. So I think a lot of times probably, well, there's going to be uses for both of these. Maybe a configuration file that you request for your application. Maybe it doesn't change that much, so you can say for that one to be performance and to use the cached data for that. And then it'll expire. You can set it to expire and have it go get a new one every day or every few hours or something like that. Where with API data, you probably want to get the newest first if available, but if your user doesn't have a network, then it can fall back to the cached one. Okay, so that's how you do some of the configuration. The other couple things I want to talk about before we get into an example is how you can how the application, you can, when there's an update that needs to be done, how you can prompt the user that an update needs to be done, and how you can show a button to prompt the user to install the application. So an update prompt is actually pretty easy. So when your application, when you build a new version of your application and deploy it, and that a user goes to the site, if they've already been to the website before, it will use all the cached files first, and so it serves it up really nice and quick, and then in the background it'll go get the new information, and then when they refresh the page again, it'll show the user the new version of the application. But what you can do is you can use this SW update service from the Angular service worker package. And then when that update is available, you can show a prompt to the user, and when they click on it, then it will just reload the page. So this is just a pretty simple function in ng on init. Check if updates are enabled, and then subscribe to that available attribute there on update. And when a value is emitted, then you can set a local variable to the component to true, and that will show whatever button or link or whatever you have. It'll show that, and then the user can click on it when they're ready. You could technically here, when that happens, you could automatically refresh for them, but maybe they're on a slow connection, so it takes 10 or 15 seconds, let's say, to download the update. And maybe by then they've started filling out a form. And if you automatically refreshed for them, they would lose all that data that they've already entered into the form, and they would be pretty frustrated by that. So I think it's better to show a prompt for them. They could finish filling out the form, and then they could click update when they're ready. The install prompt is a little bit more involved. Still not too bad, but there's a little bit more with it. Basically, the browser has a before install prompt event that will emit, and you want to add an event listener for that. And then when that happens, you can see up here, it has this prompt event equals event in the window.add event listener. Basically, we're just going to save that for later, and then we're going to show a button that the user can click on. And then when the user clicks on the button, we'll call the .prompt method on that event that we captured before. Then we'll listen for the result of that, and if they'll either accept or decline. And then after either one of those, we want to set the prompt event to undefined. And then I don't have the code in here, obviously, but we'd also want to hide that button again. The mobile browsers will show a prompt, at least Chrome for sure. By default, it shows a prompt for you asking the user if they want to install the PWA. But I read that if they decline that, it could be kind of a long time until that shows up again. And so this is a way that if they did accidentally push that button or they pushed it, it's a very easy way that you can show the user each time they open it up. It'll capture this before install prompt event and ask them, and they can decline it or they can install it, and then they have that option. So let's go ahead and switch over to a demonstration here real quick. So let me go ahead here and switch. We're gonna share VS Code here. Okay, so let me zoom in just a little bit. Hopefully it's easier to see. All right, so let's look first at when we ran the ng add at Angular/pwa. It added, for one thing, it added this manifest.json that we talked about. It gives the application a name, a short name, theme colors, background colors, the display, how you want to display the app, where it'll start, and then different icons down here. Obviously, these icons you would want to switch with whatever logo for your application that you have. And then it has this ngsw-config.json file here. And it sets up by default a couple of asset groups. The first one here that they named app, it says to prefetch this information, and it has the favicon, the index.html, and all CSS and JS files. And then in this other one that has an install mode of lazy, but an update mode of prefetch, it has all the other assets and fonts and images and all that other type of stuff. So those are the two that it defines here for us. If we go to angular.json, it edited this for us, and it added here, we can see the manifest.json that it added for us, so that it can be in the build folder. And then let's go to the app.module here. It imported this service worker module right here from Angular/service worker, and then it registers the service worker with that with this file here, and then enabled is set to production. So that's why in my build command a little while ago that I showed you in the slides, it had the ng build -- prod, because right now it's enabled only if it's in the production environment. Okay, so that's the basics of what it's done for us. We can see in here the icons that it added for us and some of the other stuff, but let's go ahead and continue. So the first thing, I basically, at this point, for the most part, I've left it the same. All this stuff up here is the same information that just is in the app.component.html file when you use ngNew to build a new application. So let's open up our terminal here, and we're going to do that ng build. We're gonna, oh, sorry, I put a space in there. I didn't want to. So we're gonna build that right now. So it'll take just a second there to build. And I'm gonna open up another browser tab here that we can check this application out in just a second. Sorry, it's going a little bit slow right now. Okay, so now it's built, and so we're going to serve this application. So I'm going to go grab actually that build command that we used back here, and I'm going to use npx HTTP server. I'm going to put it on port 8080 -c-1. I'm not sure what that flag is, but that was in the Angular docs for this. I'm going to tell it where the built files are. Okay, so now that's ready. Let me switch over to my browser. You can see it's requesting information there. Okay. I'm trying to make this a little bit easier so I don't have to switch back and forth so much. Okay, so I'm gonna switch here to this screen. All right, I'll zoom in on the code so that we can see a little bit better when we go back there. But you can see here in this application, I'm going to make my screen a little bit less. I'm going to scale it a little bit more so it's a little bit easier to see. Let's do it a little bit more. Okay. So now hopefully that's a little bit easier to see. But as you can see here, we have the progressive web app. I am making a call to the Star Wars API just to show some people so we can demo how to do an external call. But now that's just basically the default. So now we're going to come over to our HTML file, and we're just going to start. We're just going to call it v1. We've made a change to it. So we're going to come into our terminal and stop the server, and we're going to rebuild that. Hopefully it won't take too long like it did last time. But we're going to rebuild that, and then we're going to come to the network tab over in our browser, and we'll see when we first refresh the browser, nothing up here will change. That v1 will not be here, and then we'll see some stuff happen in the network tab where it updates those assets, and then when we refresh, we'll see the change. And so as soon as this is built, which it's almost there, then we'll reserve it, and then we'll watch that in the bottom there in the network tab. So almost done building. Okay, there we go. Now go ahead and serve this. All right, so again, when I first refresh, everything's gonna look the same, but pay attention to the network tab here. So everything's the same, and then this popped up at the very end, and then some more stuff happened. So you can see we got a new index.html, and this new main.js file as well was downloaded after. So now when I refresh, we'll see the v1 there. And so that's what happens. That's the background updating that I was talking about. It'll do that in the background for us. And then also something, one of those points that the Google developers site said about progressive web apps is that it should be reliable, and it should, even if you don't have a network, you shouldn't get that dinosaur saying that there's no network connection. So here in the network tools, we can disconnect from the network so that we can see what the application will look like if somebody didn't have an internet connection. And so if we refresh, we can see there were some failed calls down here, but our application still shows. The characters don't, because we haven't cached those yet. I wanted to go over that part. But the rest of this stuff, it all still works because they were all cached. And so we'll actually go over now to our, I'll just show you this real quick. This is just a service, like I said, calling the Star Wars API just to get some people. And we're going to configure this so that it will cache. So the first thing, these are called data groups, and it's an array. And we have objects. We're going to give it a name of Star Wars API. So nothing, you can name it whatever you want, but I just chose that. So let me go grab, I already had done this to try and save a little bit of time, but let me grab that information for us. Okay, so the URLs is the next one, and it's another array. Oops, I'm struggling with this live coding. All right, so HTTPS swapi.co, and then we're gonna give it some stars. So anything under that swapi.co that we call, we're gonna cache that. And then we have our cache config, and this is another object. So first I'm gonna say I want the strategy to be freshness. So prefer getting it from the network. We'll give it a max size, and this is the number of records that will be kept in the cache at a time, and then it'll swap them out. Max age, this probably doesn't matter for the Star Wars people. It's probably not going to update very often, so we can say 1 week. And then the timeout, oops. This one, again, this is how long it will wait before it uses the cache, because if it tries to make a call and it can't get the information, so we'll give it 5 seconds. So now we've changed that configuration, so we're gonna go ahead and rebuild it. We're gonna go ahead and turn this back online here. You can see again that we are connected to the internet again, so we're getting those characters. But as soon as this is built, we'll refresh it, it'll update in the background, and then we'll use that new version, and then the characters will cache after that. So this will be done building in just a second. Oh, I did something wrong here. Oh, not a valid duration, 1W. Okay, well, we'll go with 7 days, and then we'll try this again. I remember the valid ones. I thought that like D for days, W for weeks, so you could do that, but I know D for days works, so we'll do 7 days. Okay, it's just about done building here. Okay, built, and now we will go ahead and serve this new application. And again, keep an eye on the network tab, and you'll see the update happen in the background. There's the service worker, and then now it's got the new configuration for it, and we're still connected to the internet. You can see we're going to refresh, so now it's using those new files. Now we're going to go offline, and we're going to refresh, and you'll see here we have some failing calls because we don't have a connection to the internet, but we still have these characters which we got from an API call. So that's really how simple it is to keep that information in a cache because of the service worker. So the Angular team has done a really great job about providing a simple way to get up and running with a progressive web app, and they take a lot of that complicated stuff of configuring the service worker out of it for us. We don't even have to do that, and so I like that. It's really nice that we don't have to do all that stuff on our own. So let's go back over here, and we're gonna look at our update component. So this is what I showed in the slides. It's just going to subscribe to this available attribute, and when it emits, it's going to set this.update available equal to true. And if we look at the component here, it's just a paragraph, and it says there's a new version of this app available, and then you can click on update now, and it will just reloads the page. It's nothing real big. So we'll come over here to this component, and we'll put this into this page here. Oops. So just to be explicit, we're going to update our version number up here too. We're going to rebuild. So unfortunately, lots of rebuilding in this tutorial, but I think it's still pretty beneficial to see it. So basically all we've done now is added that PWA update component to the app.component.html file. And so instead of it updating in the background and us not knowing about it, we should see once the service worker goes and gets those new files and brings them back, excuse me, we should see a little paragraph pop up, and you can style it however you want, but it'll pop up and say, hey, there's an update available, and then they can click on it and it will refresh the page for them. So as soon as this is done building, it's almost there, then we will serve our new version. And again, the first time it's probably not going to work because it still has the old files on there. So we're actually going to have to do this twice. So now we refresh on our own. There's no new update because the first update we did, that app component wasn't on there. So back to the building again, and once this is done building, then we'll actually be able to see that paragraph pop up. So it should be done any second here. And hopefully at the end of this, hopefully all of this is making sense. But at the end of this presentation, I'll give you some links to a couple articles that I wrote that go over this, links to the slides as well. And hopefully it's at least a good starter. I'm about to build a PWA for work, and so I started learning about this stuff. So I still have a lot of information that I need to learn. But what I've learned so far has been really cool. So okay, so when I refresh again, it's going to use the cached version of the application, and then we should see the paragraph pop up and say that there's an update available for us. So there's the update, and now we see down here there's a new version of this app available, and so I can click update now, and then it updates, and there's no update anymore, so the paragraph is gone. Obviously you'd want to style that different, maybe make it position absolute, and have the cursor change when they hover over update now, or have that be a button or whatever, but that it's that simple really to show the user that there's an update. And again, I could have in, if we go to PWA update component, instead of just setting this dot update available equal to true, I could have just refresh the page for them right there using window.location.reload. But again, I don't want to do that. I want them to choose when they're going to update it. All right, so we have one last thing that we're going to look at here. I'm going to close all these other files. And that is an install prompt. So I've just put some very basic styles on this. It's nothing pretty or anything, but I have a little button here for install called PWA install button, and it's just going to prompt the user to install the button. I have it hidden, that's why it's not showing up now, and put it in the bottom left corner, and then just put the background color to red and the color to white. Obviously not something you'd probably put in production, but just to show us. And then I have the PWA install prompt.js file installed here. So it's going to catch the prompt, and then if when it does that, it'll save the event, it'll show the button, and then when they click on it, it's going to do this prompt. So if you see over here in the console, though, that we were catching that PWA install prompt we're catching that before install prompt event that I had here. So let's go ahead and uncomment all of this out. And then again, we have to rebuild one more time. And I'll tell you while it's rebuilding a little bit more about this. So you'll notice that this is not actually in my Angular application. I just put it into the assets folder in the scripts and then made a scripts folder that I put it in. So when I was reading about this event is emitted very quickly after the page loads. And so when I tried to do that, do all this code in an Angular component, by the time the Angular application loaded in the page, even though it's a pretty small one, it didn't catch the event. And so I could never catch that prompt event, and I couldn't show the button because it had emitted before my application was loaded. So maybe if like you do server-side rendering or something, maybe it would load fast enough that you could do it, or maybe you could put. I think I just put it in the. I made a component and put it included it in the app.component.html. Maybe you could include it somewhere else in the Angular application for it to run, and maybe you could use subjects or something like that. But for this demonstration, I just put it in here. So now we'll go ahead and serve this one up. And the first time we refresh, it's going to use the old information. And then when there's an update available, take just a second here. We have our prompt to update. And now you can see the button is showing because that event happened, and so it caught it. So if I click on that button, then it'll show this prompt that the browser handles. Do I want to install it or not? I can cancel it. And again, I forgot to hide the button after. We would want to hide it, but you can install it, and then it puts it in the Chrome apps for you. And then if I refresh the page, now that before install prompt, it doesn't fire because I've already installed it, and so it doesn't need to run. If I go the other way, you can also use this install Pwa app in a browser, and we've already installed it, but it'll show here. Now I have two of them, but if I click on it, you can see it open up here, and now it's more like a native application than just a browser tab, and that's how it would show up on your phone as well. So that's all I have today for a demonstration. We'll go back to our slideshow here for a second. And let me change over to an application window here. All right, so hopefully that demo, I know that there's a lot of building and a lot of waiting, but hopefully that showed you what it takes to start developing a progressive web app in Angular. It's really a lot simpler, I think, than it could be. The Angular team has done a really good job at, like I said, taking a lot of the complicated parts out of our hands. We don't have to do a lot of stuff that you would normally have to do to register a service worker or configure it or anything like that. They've taken a lot of that and done it for us and done the heavy lifting for us. It's really pretty easy to cache that list of characters we got from the API, and that could be any API that you get it from. It's pretty easy to show an update prompt. It's pretty easy to show that install prompt, and so I think there's a lot of things that the Angular team really, and some of it is like the install prompt is just in the browser, but they've done a lot of that heavy lifting for us, and so it's really great. I'm really excited to learn more about progressive web apps, and really excited to get started at work at actually building a full-fledged PWA. And so I'll probably be swinging back around to this topic on my blog a couple more times in the future. But if you are interested in learning more about this, you can go to pjlc.dev/pwas pwas-pt1, pwas-part 1, and you can read the blog post that I wrote on this, and then pwas-part 2 is the second part. So again, that's pjlc.dev/pwas-pt1 and pjlc.dev/pwas-pt2. And so you can go read up a little bit more about progressive web apps. It's very similar to this presentation that I've given. And if you want to see the slides for the presentation, go to pjlc.dev/ngWeber/pwas, and you can see the slides. If you have any questions, please reach out to me on Twitter at plamweb. Or you can reach out to ngWeber at ng_Weber on Twitter. We'd love to have anybody else who would like to present. You're more than welcome to come on. If you have any questions, if you have any input, if you have any clarifications, that would also be great. Until next time, though, I hope you enjoy. And I will talk to everybody sometime, probably in the next couple weeks. We'll have another meetup. But again, I'll be available on social media if you would like to reach out. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Hit that subscribe button. Let your friends and coworkers know about it. And especially if you're in the Weber County area in Utah. I'd like to do an in-person meetup at some point. So if you can reach out to me and let me know if you're interested and available, then we can coordinate that and get together and work on some of this stuff together and get to know each other. So thank you very much, and I will talk to you all soon.